Well, hello and welcome to this first and what we hope will be an ongoing series of interviews with leaders in the hospitality industry, particularly those that are focused more on the real estate side of that equation. And today we're going to be talking with Karim Alibhai, who is the founder and principal of Gencom, which is a leading developer, owner, and operator of hospitality assets throughout the Caribbean, Central America, and in North America. Karim's got about 40 years experience in the industry, and I think has a very, very interesting background that hopefully you all will find to be as compelling as I do. So with that, I'll start out with first, thank you very much, Karim, for sharing your time and your thoughts with us. And thank you for being a member of our Real Estate Executive Advisory Board. Your insights and your experience are deeply appreciated. Today's conversation is really, it's meant to be informal, just a conversation. And I want to dive into your sort of your early background, what got you interested in this business in the first place, and then what are some of the pivotal moments and some of the big experiences that have shaped your career throughout the industry? What have you learned along the way? And then ultimately, kind of, where do you see the industry today? Where do you see it going? What are the major trends? And we'll boil all that down into, if you could give some words of advice to young people, because this is primarily the audience is students and young professionals that are thinking and aspiring to a career in this industry, what words of advice would you give them based upon the learnings that you've had? Sound good?
Absolutely.
Okay, well, very good. So we'll start at the very beginning and, tell me, like, in early in life, what brought you to the industry? What attracted you to hospitality? Anyway, just give us a little bit of your background.
Yeah, thank you, Clay. Firstly, a pleasure, and to be able to impart some words of wisdom with future hospitality career pursuing students, and so it's definitely a pleasure to be doing this and exciting. It's interesting how several things. I'm a big believer in fate and destiny. I'm originally from Africa, Kenya, and around when I was 16, was really going to go finish my schooling in England, and I came to visit the U.S., Houston. I had an uncle that actually the family had acquired a Best Western motel in Houston, and the first 2 days. Coming from a small town in Kenya, obviously I was like mesmerized by the big city of Houston. I decided to sit up with my uncle to work the night audit job at the Best Western. And something just snapped the day two. It says, I like this, and maybe I should just stay in Houston. Made a pivotal decision and went ahead and applied to the university in Houston. So Rice University is where I went. Now, during the time while I was in school, and the family did have this motel, I did all kinds of jobs and work, on off-school hours, whether it was driving the van to the airport to pick up passengers, putting flyers at truck stops to get business. We were in the depth of one of the major recessions.
This has been in the early 80s?
Early 80s, okay, yeah. Correct, when Houston just took a huge dive. And that's one lesson just as we go along, is the School of Hard Knocks is one of the best teacher for any career and in this business. But so that is what I started doing. And then there was a point where I wanted to actually go do an MBA, and Wharton was a school that I really, at that time, aspired to be. And I still remember my uncle telling me, what do you mean MBA? Your father never was fortunate to be able to finish high school. You're lucky you got to finish college and get a bachelor's. So here's the keys to the motel. I'm going back to Africa. You run it. You figure this out, and let's make sure there's no capital calls. So you can imagine this is 1984.
So Houston. How old are you at this point?
So at this point,
like 21, 22?
No, I was 19.
Okay.
Yeah, I was fortunate to graduate actually a year and a half earlier because of the way the British system worked, where I studied, and so I was able to skip a grade 11, do 6 months 12th grade, and get into university. So that's where it started. I call that my MBA in the business, was working and running this motel, and which at one point we could admit that I was a negative 2-star motel. That's how bad it was at the time. But to learn how to make ends meet and work through everything from this franchise inspections with Best Western, how do you pass those? You don't have enough capital to do the normal replenishment of the FF&E or carpets, drapes. How do you figure out to go do a lease to get money to do the kind of work? So a lot of everything from working the various positions to actually having responsibility for the whole operation and being general manager, part owner, all those things were combined. And so this, fast forward 2 years into 1986, and I learned that a Comfort Inn up the street had been taken back by a bank and was in trouble. So I thought, well, now that I've learned something about the hospitality business, I said I had no formal education in hospitality at the time because my major was economics finance at Rice, but it was all through. I went to visit the banker, and the funny story is, because I was relatively young at the time, I said I've got to look older, so I grew a mustache, wore a ill-fitting 3-piece suit, and went and sat in front of the banker and started talking. And so it was, I texted with a real drawl to him, and he says, okay, so the price for this conference is $2 million, and if you can put 20%, $400,000 down payment, I'll finance you the rest. So I sort of gulp internally. Okay, I said, why don't we go have lunch and let's talk more about it? So taking to my favorite Papa's seafood restaurant. And then I tell the banker, I said, well, I don't have $400,000, but I'm a very hard worker. I'll make sure I pay you back the entire $2 million. So you finance me 100% was basically my request. He starts laughing and he says, son, I do like you. Okay, here's what I'll do. I'll make you one loan for the property for $1.6 million, and I'll make you another loan personally for $400,000 for the down payment. So you can buy this. But then you figure out the working capital, everything else. I said, deal. I was nervous, didn't know exactly how this is all going to pencil out, but I said, okay, I'm buying my second motel. And with the lessons I learned at the Best Western, roll up the sleeves, made that Comfort Inn operation more efficient, had a piece of land in the front, and I said, this piece of land is doing nothing. Oh, let me go talk to Denny's and see if they will. And suddenly we get a nice big rent payment, and these are some of the foundations where when I come to today and having to learn all these things.
Yeah, not only a nice, good rent, but also synergistic to the operations of the hotel.
Correct.
Right, for the guests.
So with that, suddenly things started taking off. So between 86 and 1990, I was able to go out and acquire almost 14 new properties.
Now, that was a pivotal time in the history of the industry here in the United States, because it was sort of the ushering in the savings and loan crisis and sort of the collapse of a lot of hospitality real estate. I imagine now, with your experience, you were able to capitalize on that a bit, huh?
Well, this is it. And that was the opportunity. And, worked up the food chain. It went with what was the Best Western, Comfort Inn, Econo Lodge, Days Inn. And I still remember I had my biggest celebration when I bought my first Holiday Inn. It was a 3-story exterior corridor hotel, And I still remember the words to my friends when we were celebrating the dinner. And I said, you know, America is one of these places that anyone, even a struggling immigrant, which is how I defined myself at the time, can be successful because it gives everyone a chance and a shot. If you roll up your sleeves and there's a will, there's a way, you can get things done. And it was, and obviously I started then a small management company with 3 people because as we were adding properties, and I still remember one of the persons I really admired the most in the industry is the late John Q. Hammonds. And he was a huge Holiday Inn owner. Sure. So I said, well, if I can find someone from his company to bring in, that could be a good. So I was able to find 2 people and created my first early start of a hotel management company that managed everything that we went and were acquiring. At that time, the equity, because now the properties we bought were actually cash flowing, and while the family gave me some support, most of it was all internally generated. And then I was able to partner up with friends of family, other person, and bring it. It was a start of bringing new investors, but more like individuals. There was no institutional breakthrough as yet. Sure. A big pivotal moment happened in 1991. And as you were mentioning, the savings and loan crisis, when the banks collapsed, there was a lot of hotels that were in those banks. And the government formed, I think you'd be familiar with, the Resolution Trust Corporation, the RTC, to dispose of these hotels. So there happened to be a property in New Orleans called the Bourbon Orleans Hotel, right in the French Quarter, that the Houston office of the RTC, we signed up to acquire that hotel. 2 weeks into doing our due diligence, and get a call and saying, I'm sorry, but the Washington, D.C. office has sold this hotel in a portfolio sale to a group out of New York. And I said, well, how can that happen? I have a contract. Well, my lawyer at the time says, well, remember, it's the federal government. It's called federal immunity. They can make mistakes. You can't do anything about it. So that's where my sixth sense, which are some of the lessons that even till today, nothing ventured, nothing gained, is something that I preach to my team all the time. So, let me just go to New York and meet with these people and just see what's on their mind, and maybe there's a way to work together or something. So I make a call, and you probably remember the name, happened to be a lawyer called Paul Nussbaum, okay. And this group was, they called themselves Patriot American, and they were backed by Leon Black, who was the founder of Polo, and Bill Mack, and they were buying a $500 million portfolio of assets from the government, RTC office buildings and hotels. So as I go to that meeting, not knowing exactly what to expect, and as we started talking, I realized they had no experience, no knowledge of hotels. They were office building experts. The hotels were being forced upon them by the government. So in meeting me, I said, well, this is interesting. This is someone that wants to put his money where his mouth is, has experience, and maybe that's the kind of partner we need, because everyone else that's been approaching us has just been wanting to do a management contract, but not prepared to invest. It was literally in that one afternoon, I'd gone to try and see if this one hotel we could work together. We shook hands 3 hours later to do 15 hotels together from the government. And as part of it, they said, well, we'd like to buy a piece of your management company, which was still a fledgling little company.
This was Gencom American?
Gencom American.
Okay.
And that's why it was Gencom Hospitality. And when Patriot American bought a 49% interest in it, it became Gencom American Hospitality. So this was a big pivotal moment in the sense that 15 hotels at one time, very complicated transaction, buying from the US government, and they were all over the place, and had to quickly staff up
Yeah, that's
to get
massive scale that you got to try to deal with.
correct. And fast forward 24 months later, we'd done very well with the portfolio, and at this point, our company had grown to almost 37, 38 hotels.
And is Gencom American only managing the hotels that you own or own a part? Or are you starting to do third-party management as well?
No. So at that time, we just stayed focused on what we had ownership stake in, saying that, the resources to really, because a lot of people forget that hotels are as much a business as their real estate.
Exactly.
And so it's unlike, an office building, you get 5-year leases and you've done most of your work. This is a daily lease that has to be occupied. So we stayed very focused. Come 1994, and another very interesting situation transforms my sort of career and trajectory. I'm sitting with our partners, Patriot American in Dallas, and I'm saying, is there a way that from these hotels we have, that we can get some money out, but still keep managing them? Because I've now built a really nice management company, really, really proud of the team that I've created. And we'd actually done 2 major transactions that had really put us on the map. One was this 700-room Omni in Baltimore that we'd bought. And then around the Houston Astrodome, we'd bought 4 hotels, 1,300 rooms, which was a major turnaround story, and actually moved into the Sheraton for a year because it was losing $7 million a year, those hotels. And in the first year, I still remember, I got it to negative $10,000, $7 million turnaround. And this was all situations like, for example, because the owner of the Houston Astros owned the hotels, so all the payroll benefits were on the Astros type of benefits. So there was a 30% mark where you could actually price it at 11, 12% more, So a number of things like that. But anyway, so in 94, I'm sitting in, he says, look, let's call my investment banker friends at that time, Kidder Peabody. So they fly down, they say, look, why don't you guys consider doing a REIT? So I'm feeling kind of dumb because I don't know what a REIT is. I didn't want to ask a lot. I said, obviously in those days you didn't have the to Google things or whatever.
Yeah.
Later on I find out, so it's called a real estate investment trust. It's a holding company that have public shareholders, can have in private shareholders too, as I found out later. And
so did you form a private REIT first, and then later you took that public, or did you go right straight with an IPO?
No, we straight went. So what happened is we said, okay, what does it take to create a REIT? So I said, look, you've got to hire an accounting firm, legal firm to do audits, to do various things. And as we found, it's a very expensive process. We thought that in the fourth quarter of 94, we were going to be able to do this with 15 hotels initially that we would take public, and the markets, we had a recession, the markets were really bad, and they said, it's not a good time to issue equity. So while we're sitting and pondering what do we do next, the bankers say, we would like you to meet a company out of Miami, which is part of the reasons, I'll explain that how I got to Miami, called Carnival Hotels and Casinos. It's a affiliate of Carnival Cruise Lines.
Previously, the Continental companies?
Correct.
Yeah. Woody Weiser
Woody
and those
Weiser.
guys? Okay.
So we meet with Woody Weiser and Don Lefton. Don Lefton, who's been on the FIU, for a long time. And we sit down and, their experience went back into the late 60s, early 70s. They were primarily just a management company, but they had about 80 hotels. And we put together an overall plan where Carnival buys Patriots 50% interest in my management company, so the bankers can sort of show that, okay, between Carnival Hotels and Casinos and Gencom, we're now 135 hotel company, the second largest in the US, and then go ahead and create the REIT behind that. And I still remember a very interesting at the time. So in the earlier meetings, Don Lefton says, "Look, we can't really use Gencom's name. It's not going to show well. They have no experience. It's a young company." And I was quite hurt and upset for my team that, because we frankly owned more of the hotels than we did. And when the REIT was successfully launched and was oversubscribed in the fall of '95, a publication called Green Street Advisors, which was when they wrote something about that's what a REIT done or not, and they put a paragraph in the end saying, "We're particularly very impressed with Gencom, a young team led by Karim Alibhai," and put us a glowing recommendation in there as part of the endorsement. So we actually had a good laugh about it. So right around this time when the REIT was formed, I was coming back and forth to Miami, given our partnership with Carnival. So the way we were organized at the time is that we, Gencom, could still do private transactions outside the REIT, and the REIT could do transactions with other operators and owners. So, and that was because before, market not like a captive party. So while with the REIT, they were acquiring hotels, and some of them we would manage, lease back, but we were still continuing to do our projects. And here in Miami, we acquired the Omni Mall and the hotel, which is the Hilton now, from Equitable. And around the same time, a very interesting, another pivotal moment happened, because I'd always sort of had the notion that luxury hotel ownership is only for people with egos.
Mm-hmm.
Luxury cannot make money, was the thinking, because it costs too much to operate.
Now. But
Well, it's so funny. So right across from this hotel where we're sitting today, there is, if you remember, the Grand Bay Hotel.
Sure. Yeah, it was a Continental Company deal.
Right. So part of Woody Weiser developed it. Well, 50% was owned by a Venezuelan family. So I'm sitting there on a Wednesday evening. It's a sushi night. And we're talking, and the Venezuelan family representative, they were actually bankers. And he looks and he says, "Do you want to buy this hotel?" I said, "Why?" He says, "It's losing money, and I don't like hotels." He said, "I own 50%, and your partner owns the other 50%. Do you want to buy my 50%? So I was intrigued, because the hotel was very pretty, but I was going against my principle of not to touch a luxury hotel. So, but I couldn't help myself. I said, "How much?" He puts a number on a napkin. It was a very small number because the hotel had a lot of debt on it. I said, "Oh, okay." So I couldn't help myself. I had to counter. I would have accepted the price, but I had to give something to That's the other thing over the years, the negotiation. Anyway, so we agree on a deal. And so Woody Weiser was obviously, he says, "Well, Karim, the same family owns half the land I own in Key Biscayne. And there used to be a hotel there, the Sheraton, that got blown down by Hurricane Andrew. And that piece of land is now owned by us. And I want to do a Grand Bay Hotel with some residences there." I didn't know exactly where Key Biscayne was. We went there, look out at that water, and you say, wow, So 2 weeks later, make a deal to buy the 50% of the Key Biscayne land. And then Woody Wiseman said, well, why don't we do our own luxury brand, Grand Bay Hotels and Resorts? At the same time, while analyzing the Grand Bay Hotel, which is another lesson that I was continuing to learn, is that, and which today is becoming a big foundation, is the hotel operator is not always the best operator for the restaurants and beverage. They think they are, and they, so at the time when I analyzed the operation, the big loss was coming from the restaurant at the Grand Bay Hotel in Miami. So I happen to know the owner of Beach A in New York. So I sat down, I said, would you want to do a Beach A here in Miami? He said, oh, I'd love to. So we work out a deal where Beach A comes in, and not only does it enhance the Grand Bay's sort of standing, but we turn $1.5 million loss into a positive $500,000 by Beach A taking in and giving us a lease.
So it was a pure lease, or was there a revenue share?
A pure lease.
Okay, better.
Mm-hmm. So from 96 through 98 starts this, okay, let's do our own Grand Bay Hotels and Resorts brand. Patriot American, which was obviously still, we were major shareholders in there and we were working together, had acquired these carefree resorts, the Boulders, Peaks of Telluride. And then we engineered the purchase of Golden Door Spa. So we thought that, okay, let's bring these together and now flag them all as Grand Bay Hotels and Resorts. And at the same time, from our private side, we acquired a site in Philadelphia, an old office building and a bank building, which I'll come to the story how it became Ritz-Carlton. But that was with a local partner in Philadelphia to develop that into a Grand Bay Hotel. And in Toronto, right at ground zero Toronto, corner of Blue Ridge Avenue, there's a hotel called Park Plaza Hotel, that we acquired that to redevelop into a luxury Grand Bay Hotel. So we now had on our personal portfolio the Key Biscayne side that we wanted to develop, the Philadelphia side, the Toronto side, and then we had this Grand Bay Hotel.
So were these sort of your first moves into development? Everything at this point had been acquiring?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. So this was sort of, and in the meantime, we continued to other parts of our portfolio, which come to why today how we're organized, is that we still were acquiring non-5-star projects, the Hyatt in Montreal, and a number of other situations that we would continue to do and manage. So several things in 1997, and this is one of the very big lessons that I learned, that you can't get arrogant or cocky on success, because headwinds can come from anywhere at any time. And a number of the lessons, which again, I'll come to why we're structured the way we're today, but there was one huge lesson at the time. Patriot American was acquiring Wyndham from the Crow family under this pair share structure. And they convinced me that we should merge your management company and 20 more hotels from your portfolio, and then you come and run Wyndham. And on the surface, it sounded an amazing opportunity. And to move to Dallas and be part of this. So we did that transaction in 1997. The first day I went into the new Dallas offices, my heart went into my stomach, and I couldn't explain why. I felt nerve-wracking. I felt I lost complete control, because I was now in this larger public company, and I was so used to, conducting and running my operation in the way we did. Anyways, within the first 90 days, we were not seeing eye to eye between the CEO, Paul Nussbaum, and myself. because this company had now gone from 20 hotels when we started in 94 to almost 180 hotels and resorts. It had grown exponentially. And having grown a business organically, property by property, I knew the challenges of digesting growth. And at that time, CEO Patri says, look, we need to buy this company called Interstate Hotels and Resorts. And what we will do is we will take a whole bunch of the Marriotts and make them into Wyndhams. And he convinced the Crow family and the board, and that's the other lesson I learned, is if I'm going to do something, I need to, and take that kind of shareholding, I need to either control the board or have co-control or have major influence. I didn't. Anyways, everything that could go wrong went wrong in 98. Marriott sued Patriot for trying to deflag those
I figured
Marriott.
that wouldn't be an easy job.
Exactly. So that was going on. And then the acquisition was financed with all debt, no equity. Another big lesson that one learns as you capitalize projects. And a shock hits the system. There is a Russian debt default, which shakes up the world markets. And this hedge fund long-term capital management implodes. So the credit markets are totally seized. You can't issue any equity. And next thing you know, the Patriot American equity stock value in the public market starts dropping. So what?
Well, this is also coinciding with the dot-com era, in which all the interest all of a sudden comes to these darling dot-coms, and stodgy old publicly traded REITs kind of lost favor with investors.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct. So I'm seeing 15 years of work evaporating day by day as the stock plummeted from $33 down to $6. It was a very, very, probably the most depressing time I've felt, because nothing you could do. Your hands were tied, behind your back. And we had to bring in a rescue capital, which is where I learned about some of the more tools of convertible preferred, and to keep the company afloat. And it was led by Apollo, Tommy Lee, an investor group. So at that time, I decided I did not want to stay on in a public company. I would continue to stay on the board because they wanted me to definitely play a role. And I said, let me just move to Miami. This is 1998. And establish Gencom 2.0. And we still had a number of assets, but we also had this luxury portfolio. Now, you talk about a double whammy, triple whammy, that the luxury assets that we were developing, the Key Biscayne, Philadelphia, Toronto, we got into the same problem with the credit markets seizing. Our debt commitments were not going to perform. So we're now sitting here with projects underway, but not having the capital to finish them. And suddenly I get a call from a head of development for Marriott Corporation. Said, look, we'd like to come meet with you and talk about your projects. I said, okay. The company said, look, we bought the Ritz-Carlton chain in 94, and we've not had much success growing it. It's 4 years into it. And what you're doing with these projects is something very unique and impressive for us with residential. And I said, okay. So we would like to flag them as Ritz-Carltons. What do you need? Now, right around the same time, if you may remember, the original CEO of Ritz-Carlton, Horst Schulze, And we had a very spirited meeting because Horst's vision was every Ritz-Carlton should look the same, whether it's in Cancun, Mexico, or Boston. It needs to have the grill restaurant. It needs to have the blue carpet down the corridor.
White gloves, top hat,
exactly.
Even at the beach.
The tea room,
Yeah.
all that. We had designed ours to be much more indigenous to the environment. So a beach resort needed to be casual elegance and different, whereas a city hotel would look more one. And he says, no, I'm not going to accept this unless you change the design. So we're not going to change the design. It took Bill Marriott personally to break that logjam and said, no, I like Karim's vision and we'll go with that. And then the next thing they said, well, what do you need to make these? I said, well, I need a $250 million line of credit. They kind of gulped and said they thought, they could give 20, 30 million of key money and get these done. And bless his soul, at that time, the late Arne Sorensen had just become CFO. And he went to bat to Bill Marriott and the board and said, look, this is a transformational transaction for Ritz-Carlton. Residential hotel, we pick up 3 of these. And we left the Grand Bay brand, started our relationship with Ritz-Carlton, and then they brought us a deal that they were not having success getting done, which is now the Ritz-Carlton Bachelor's Gulch, a ski resort. And we went ahead and took over that transaction. So going to the 2000s, we're now in the luxury residential mixed-use business, which is a cornerstone today of one of our businesses. So that was like I said, a very. Sometimes that things happen for a reason. Now, it wasn't fun going through what happened with Patriot and all that, but I don't think my move to Miami might have happened, and who knows where things, which is where I met my ex-wife and my kids, which all were born here. But I moved here in '98, and I lived initially in Key Biscayne as we were developing the Ritz-Carlton. Lived right next door for 15 years. So with our Gencom 2.0, we had real estate holdings that were non-5-star, and then we had the projects that I just mentioned that became Ritz-Carltons. But my DNA always had an operating platform that I just always craved and always wanted to. But what I didn't want to do this time is actually run the operating platform, which is what I had done with Gencom American Hospitality and ran the operating company. And what I wanted to do was really have Gencom be more a real estate owner, execution of renovation, development, asset management, residential sales. So the company that had actually created the problem for Patriot Interstate Hotels and Resorts had been spun out as part of the Marriott settlement, and it was trading as a small public company. It was still the largest management company in the US outside the brands at the time. The CEO of the company was someone that actually was with the Continental companies and who I'd known. I think you mean, Tom Hewitt. Mm-hmm. So I went and sat down with him, and he says, look, we really aren't growing. We're a manager. It'd be great if you could take a position in this company and help us grow. So I went ahead and set up an investment consortium that was myself, Lehman Brothers, and another fellow that you know from the industry, Mahmood Kimji, Highgate Hotels. He and I had been close friends from the early days of Houston. We've collaborated together. And we made the investment into Interstate.
Now, was this pre the acquisition or merger with Maristar?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. So we went ahead and literally doubled the EBITDA of Interstate in the first 2 years. by spinning out their housing group, which was really a lot of overhead, and then sat down with Paul Wetzel of Meristar, who said, why don't we merge the two management companies together, which was, they had the Capstar REIT, and then Meristar was the operating company. So we merged Interstate and went from 180 hotels to close to a little over 300 under management, largest franchisee for Marriott. And as part of the transaction, I was able to get myself and my investors 3x of the investment they'd made, while we still owned a third of the entire company. Fast forward in 2007, we sold our position in Interstate in a public market execution. Around the same time, also in 2002, we acquired a small extended stay brand called Summerfield Suites. It had about 6 hotels, and we did it again with Lehman, with a goal of actually growing the Summerfield brand. Extended stay had become quite a coveted business at the time, with the success of Marriott Residence Inn, Homewood Suites. In a period of about 15 months, we went from 6 properties to 19 properties. We bought a small chain called Bradford Suites, converted them into Summerfield Suites. 2 years into this business, we get unsolicited interest from Hyatt Hotels and the Starwood, which at that time was Barry Sternlicht had created that with ITT Sheraton and Westin and so forth, both wanting extended stay businesses. We ultimately ended up doing the deal with Hyatt. We paid a very, very huge EBITDA multiple and premium, because it was cheaper for them to buy this, because the R&D of creating their own would have cost them more. So we did the transaction, exited that, which today is now really created the base for what is their Hyatt House, Hyatt
Correct.
Place.
Yep.
Right. So that was the...
That and the AmeriSuites, right? The AmeriSuites became the Hyatt Places. The Summerfields became all the Hyatt Houses.
Correct.
Yeah, okay.
Correct. And that was sort of our PropCo, OpCo kind of proposition. At the same time, our luxury mixed-use division now started, and we were doing exclusively Ritz-Carltons at the time. So after successfully opening Philadelphia, Key Biscayne, Ritz, and the Bachelor Gulch Ski Resort, the Toronto one, we were going to make it a Ritz-Carlton, and we get an offer from the Pritzkers that was at that time the highest price per room in Canadian history, who really wanted that site to make it a Park Hyatt, because they were opening a casino in Niagara. A lot of the customer base came from Toronto, especially Asian base. They wanted that presence. And that's another valuable lesson too I'd learned: never fall in love with your real estate.
Yeah.
So when someone's giving you a price that was year 10 in your pro forma, don't overthink it, because one can get emotional and say. So anyways, so we sold that one off. We then had the Interstate business that was going on, the Summerfield Suites business going on. We were doing other real estate, but on the luxury side, we went ahead and bought what was the old Ritz, and that had become now just the Lodge at Rancho Mirage, to make it back into a Ritz-Carlton with the residential part of it. We went ahead and bought the Ritz-Carlton Kapalua in Hawaii, with the goal of taking 550 rooms and converting it to a 300-room hotel and 250 into condo hotel units. At the same time, and this is another one of the big lessons learned, is we acquired effectively 2 islands in the Caribbean, one in the Bahamas called Rose Island, and one in Turks and Caicos called West Caicos Molasses Reef. And the idea at that time, the late Simon Cooper was CEO of Ritz, and we said, look, we want to keep working exclusively with the Ritz, but we need a 6-star brand for these 2 islands because it's going to be very, very special. What can we do? So as we sit down, the idea comes up, let's call it Ritz Reserve. Almost like a Mondavi Reserve, but Ritz Reserve. And we'll call them individual names, and not the Ritz-Carlton Turks and Caicos, but in that case, Molasses Reef, a Ritz Reserve,
Kind of the beginning of soft branding.
Correct. Now, these were both greenfield developments, which are challenging to begin with no matter where in the world when you just start completely fresh, the infrastructure, delays, costs. But on islands, it's even more challenging.
And in the Bahamas, even more challenging.
Exactly. So as we're going down this journey, and at the time, the other lesson we learned is we were using a lot of debt because Lehman Brothers was providing it, and laugh back and say, I guess they used to call it the credit morphine. Say, well, I can own as much as possible and take 80% debt. And again, another lesson learned. But so we had all these developments going on with Ritz, and then here comes 2008. And obviously, we know what happens. And it just so happened, I think we had sort of 4 strikes. We were in luxury, we were in residential, we were in development, and our partner and lender was Lehman Brothers. How much more could go wrong to be in a crisis, and I still remember, I was flying to Europe, and on Sunday night, just before I left on the flight, I'm calling my contact at Lehman Brothers, who was in the Federal Reserve building.
So this is September 2008?
Correct.
Okay.
September 2008. And I said, what's going to happen? And he says, okay, good news. Everything is fine. Barclays is buying us. The government is backstopping us. You can relax, have a glass of wine on your flight and chill. So if I relax, I land in London to connect, and I go to the lounge, but there's a lot of chatter going on. And again, I had that sinking feeling, oh my God. And I look, and there's people reading the Financial Times, headquarters, Lehman Brothers declares bankruptcy. So here we have close to 850 million worth of positions with 4,000 workers who have to get paid. And we'd already funded our equity, so the rest was all coming from the Lehman draws and the lending facility. And no one's answering the phone. And the people we knew said, look, we don't know what's going on. We were just told, don't show up to work. We're shut down. So here is this black hole so this was, probably didn't sleep for three nights. Just organized our teams and said, listen, let's figure out how we do the messenger. What do we protect? What do we just let go? We don't know what to do. And in Turks and Caicos, we had a very interesting incident. We had 400 workers from China and an Israeli contractor. And unbeknownst to us, the Israeli contractor had not paid the Chinese workers for almost 5 months. And we were only 2 months in arrears, and apparently they were using the money for other projects. And so at that point, the receivers said, okay, we need to just fly all the Chinese workers back to Shanghai. And they took the Israeli contractors as hostages and said, we will not leave until we get paid, because the rule was that they had to pay 3 months of salary to the employment agencies, which were quasi-mafiosi type controlled in China. And they would not go back because they would get killed if they didn't come with that. So they said, we'd rather just die on this island. And here I'm getting calls from CNBC and Israeli minister of, this, that, what can we do here? How do we rescue? Anyway, somehow that got sorted, but it was a very, very difficult time to figure out how to sort of deal with this kind of a shock. And then I think the perseverance that I'd learned from the previous shocks, you never give up. Something, if you really, really put your mind to it, you can figure it out. And in 1999 March, the Dow's at 7,000. The only person investing money is Warren Buffett, who's not going to come into a luxury residential deal. He's buying Goldman Sachs stock and other stuff. We create a venture with an Argentine family office and raise close to 200 million of equity in that very tough period to go buy a number of our debt positions that were in default and recapitalize the projects. So our luxury business was able to survive and come out of this the great financial crisis, in actually overall better shape. But there were some projects we just said, like Rose Island and Turks and Caicos, we should not even think about but as we sat and on a board with our, what's our business plan going forward for Gencom? And then the luxury mixed use. So first thing we says is buy somebody else's mistake. And that resonates, so from 2010 till today, the projects we've done in the luxury, when I say somebody else's mistake in the sense that, distress, things have gone wrong, the wrong ownership group took it down, and then you go and fix the issues and build off that, than going to try and make your own mistake, so to speak, or build on your own island. And just real quick, in 2006, we did our first European transaction. So given our close relationship with Marriott that owned the Ritz-Carlton chain, they were buying the Renaissance hotel chain, and they were looking not to keep the real estate on their books. So they wanted to really sell off the real estate, and they worked with us on 6 hotels in Europe, in Paris and Amsterdam mainly. And so again, with my very close friend, frequent partner, Mahmood Kimji, we created GenGate Europe and partnered with Goldman Sachs to buy those 6 hotels, which we survived through the financial crisis. We repositioned them, and we ended up selling them in 2012 to Host Hotels, GIC. So 2010 to today, Gencom 3.0 is now where we are. Having gone through 2 shocks at 1.0, which was quite different, and then 2.0, which was things happen, so you have to be really, really insulated and do the best, because you can't bet on everything is going to go right, no matter how good you might be, how much you know. But with obviously the track record and experience we had, we started attracting a lot of institutional and family office capital. And so at that time, we said, okay, in luxury, let's buy somebody else's mistake. So this hotel was sitting in Ritz-Carlton Coconut Grove, was owned by AIG Insurance Company. So we acquired this at a distressed value. Ritz Fort Lauderdale was owned effectively by CIBC Bank. We went and acquired that asset. And as we talked about the Peninsula Papagayo, which is a significant success story today, especially in 2015, it was brought to us that, look, there's this 4 Seasons in Costa Rica, and the ownership group should never have been in this business. They're not-for-profit foundation.
They're a foundation, yeah.
Right. And they need to get out of it. And your partner, Frank Nardoza, from the KPMG days knew me, and he says, look, we've been told that we don't want to go widely marketed for this because we don't have that much time, and to find 3 buyers in America who could actually perform on this. And you're one of the 3. And initially we declined, and a group called Dolphin, backed by Apollo, had it signed up. And then I still remember December 27, 2015, I'm driving to Fort Lauderdale, and just something, so I called Frank. I said, Frank, is that Costa Rica deal still available? He said, well, good timing. We'll know January 2nd if they don't put up the deposit, earnest money, and can you act quickly? I said, yeah, absolutely, we can act quickly. Well, January 2nd, he calls, he says, your wishes come true. And we went ahead and started. It took us 15 months to finish through because it's a very complicated transaction, concession land. But what we saw was, again, somebody that envisioned a great project. But what typically happens a lot in this industry is people that are not in the business panic when you hit a great financial crisis, or so they stop spending money on the renovation, the golf course was in bad shape, the sprinklers weren't working, a lot of things. And what we saw was this is a jewel in the rough. So that project today, 7 years later, we partnered with the High Net Worth Family Office. We repositioned the Four Seasons, which went from what was doing like 9 million of cash flow to almost 37 today. We acquired the Andaz Hotel there on the peninsula, repositioned that. We acquired another piece of land where the Ritz Reserve is where we're going to open in the next few months, which is a luxury mixed-use development. We acquired another 800 acres of land there because everything, and we remarketed the destination as Peninsula Papagayo, which is now viewed very, very favorably, throughout North America. And we'd kind of call it, well, Costa Rica is Hawaii of the East Coast. Well, it now feels like that's what it absolutely is, because a lot of East Coast people, Texas people say, well, instead of going to Hawaii, we like coming to Costa Rica. Great labor market,
Yep.
Very different from the greenfield of Bahamas.
Correct, yeah. Let me see if we can pause 1 second here, because I think there have been a lot of lessons that it sounds like to me. First, and I'm going to kind of repeat some things back that I'm hearing, and then you tell me if it's so. One of them, you sort of started out, initially working with your family, taking over an asset, and really focusing on the operations side of the business. Eventually, that sort of led you into buying more assets and owning. So now you're an owner and an operator. Then that led you into developing. So you started developing. You acquired a bunch of assets, then you started developing things. You diversified into luxury and then into branded residential and all of those type things, which kind of gets us now to where we are, where you've got an expertise in a lot of different functional areas of the hospitality and the hospitality real estate area. Some of the lessons, it sounds like, that you've learned is control. You want to be able to be in a situation where you have control and you don't walk into a situation where all of a sudden you have responsibilities, but maybe not necessarily control. Be careful of over leverage. Sounds like you learned some lessons there as well. Perseverance. Sometimes you just got to persevere, stick through things, and be creative. But when you do, there's oftentimes a lot of opportunity that comes out of adversity, which kind of leads to me to another conclusion or a lesson that I heard from what you said, which is don't be so quick to judge. You never know. What sounds like it could be horrible as a worst situation could end up being quite an opportunity. If you persevere through it, you have the ability to control, you don't over leverage, which lastly gets you to where, hey, a lot of people make mistakes They have fundamentally good ideas, fundamentally good assets. It's just poor execution. And if you can focus on capitalizing on other people's mistakes, but bring all of those lessons that you brought to the situation, a lot of value can be created there. Does that all sound like a pretty good summary of where we've gotten thus far, which maybe leads us to Gencom 3.0 in terms of like, what are the major trends you're seeing now, and where do you see this industry going in 10 years?
Yes, exactly. No, I think you captured absolutely that all these lessons, which effectively are all rolling up your sleeves and working, whether it was the operating side of the business for the first 12 years of my career, then the whole real estate development side, which was all, again, not just sort of saying, oh, here's a piece of paper and let's contract this out to people, and no, which is a huge part of how my team works with me today. If a young analyst joins us at age 24 or younger, usually if they went to an Ernst & Young, they're pigeonholed to doing just this work. Then they would. Here, I literally put them in an immersion to learn every aspect of what they're doing. Financing, just not an analyst running numbers, operations, different things. So today, basically, the verticals we have are this luxury mixed-use business, which is now close to a $7.5 billion AUM business, and everything in that business we have ownership in. We do the soup to nuts execution, except day-to-day management brand. We've expanded the luxury brands from Ritz-Carlton. Now we have Four Seasons, Rosewood, St. Regis, Auberge, Andaz,
And you've got
Fairmont.
an operating platform in Pyramid, right?
Correct. So that's
Okay.
the other, which is, again, that same thing I said. We always like the operating platform business, And 2015, we started a 20 hotel company, then bought a Benchmark, then rolled up the Pyramid. So we now have that arm, which is about a 250 hotel management company headquartered out of Boston. Great CEO. Again, from all the lessons that we've learned. So from our perspective, from a trends viewpoint, obviously, first and foremost, we're always going to be opportunistic. During the pandemic, we were actually a big buyer of assets, and we didn't panic. We kept the Ritz Reserve development going, the Fairmont Bermuda going. So one big trend that the luxury and leisure business, which have been the best performers since the pandemic, are going to continue that trend because of several things that have happened. Well, one is obviously there's a fair bit of affluence entering the class which can afford that. But people want to take more vacations, and a big trend we see is a lot more travel Thursday to Sunday because of Zoom, and people don't look at an issue if you're not in the office Friday.
Which naturally leads to a more residentially oriented product because you're going to be staying longer, you're going to be doing a little bit of work, et cetera. So.
Exactly. So we think that the growth and supply is limited in that sector because there are barriers to entry. It is not easy to capitalize those businesses. It takes a lot of capital. So we're going to continue our focus. At the same time, for example, we look at New York City and say a lot of people have been running from New York City recently because, well, it's the union. It's very difficult to do business there. And we looked at it. There's something very interesting going on. Not since 1998 has there been this low of a supply quantum, and demand is outpacing that. So even with the union costs, it's very well positioned for the next 7 years. So most recently, we acquired the Thompson Hotel in New York, which was bought at 40% replacement cost. So
under that same thesis. Is it only New York City that, everyone says don't bet long term against New York City? Does that port to, say, San Francisco and places like that, or do you see that as a different kettle of fish?
So, it's an interesting, we had a long conversation. So we bought a portfolio of hotels, which 6 during the pandemic are in Portland.
Yeah, very.
Now, it's still having a very difficult time turning around. And, the other lesson that we have learned, but we didn't totally heed to that lesson, is that buying cheap doesn't necessarily mean you're going to be successful. You need other, but the way we think is, look, San Francisco, Portland, look, if Detroit could come back, these cities will come back.
Yeah, I think so too.
They're just, yeah, it's too much, but they, number of things have to go right. But I can see in 5 years that these cities could be back.
Okay. So you're still very involved in the industry. Future projects that you're looking at, if there's anything that you can share with regard to moving forward. I know you mentioned the Ritz-Carlton Reserve, which is under development, about to open up here soon. Any other areas of the world or types of products that you got your eye on?
Yeah, so look, we are also under redo of the Fairmont in Bermuda. We own the Rosewood at Tucker's Point, which was, again, another challenging situation where people had forgotten about Bermuda, saying it's very difficult to do business there. Yeah. But we had the contrarian approach very successfully. The Rosewood works, so we acquired the Fairmont during the pandemic. So that project will open in about 18 months. A significant redo, new beach club, residential. We have confidentially, and I can't name, but we just signed up a large project last week from an insurance company in a major market that has the characteristics of what we like to see. It's luxury, it needs a turnaround. Seller happens to be an institution that should not have been in the business. Europe, we're going to be announcing actually on Monday through our Pyramid affiliate. We negotiated to buy a hotel management company that we closed on 2 days ago that will make our affiliate the largest operator of hotels in the UK outside the brands.
And will that be a separate entity, or will you roll that under the Pyramid benchmark?
That's rolled up under the Pyramid benchmark, yeah. Okay. So that sets us up to do further real estate investing in Europe, which is a much more difficult market because it's quite fragmented. But I think here the leisure destinations of the Caribbean, the Costa Rica, albeit there are the big challenges that even in Florida, that is insurance. One can't completely ignore global warming and what's going on and things that you got to stay braced for these kind of shocks. Here in Miami, a significant project is in downtown Miami. So we acquired the Hyatt during the pandemic. And again, it was something because of relationship with Hyatt that most institutional capital would say, well, the ground lease expires in 7 years and we can't buy it. We took the risk and said, Hyatt, look, we'll go work it and see if we can get a 99-year extension. The big Hyatt Corporation had been trying to do it for 15 years and they couldn't get it done. Well, our team, I'm pleased to say, was able to get it in 18 months. Perseverance, again, being the thing. Yeah. And now we have a 99-year lease. So the project we're looking to do is 800 apartments and 1,000 rooms of Grand Hyatt and Thompson, plan. So the nice thing is,
so it'll have a more state Grand Hyatt and a lifestyle element with bringing in Thompson. Correct. For a portion of it as well. We look very much forward, and thank you. We're going to be bringing a group of students through here on November 21st, I believe, to learn a little bit more about the Riverbridge Center project.
Yeah, Miami Riverbridge, correct. Yeah. Okay.
So that's going to be super exciting just to learn a little bit more about that. All right, well, time is drawing a little bit short, so, man, we appreciate your time. I want to see if, this is the primary audience for this is going to be students and aspiring young professionals. So looking back over the arc of your career, we've gone over some of the things that you've learned about control and be careful of leverage and perseverance and be slow to judge. You never know what seems like maybe a mistake turns into an opportunity, and learn how to capitalize on other people's mistakes. But the Karim of today, looking back at a young Karim 40-something years ago, well, what piece of advice would you give a young person that's looking to come into this industry now? What skill set, what personal characteristics do you think would serve them well?
Yeah, look, I think there is no shortcut to what I call a school of hard knocks and experience. Just getting a hospitality degree is not going to in itself do it. Do not be afraid to really get into the weeds and fully understand the business first and foremost, how it works, how all the elements work. From there, where there's a will, there's a way. And, you know, as I said, go work multiple positions. And whether if you're headed into, you know, the world of finance, for example, as we just met a former employee of yours, Margot, who worked with you, and she is now at a fairly young age going to come and lead a major investment for us. But she went and did construction management in the hospitality industry because she really loved that. She learned other finance aspects with JLL, and so could really come and contribute tremendously, you know, to us. So the advice would be is, you know, don't give up, stay the course, and, you know, there's no substitute, as I said, for the School of Hard Knocks and really, really rolling up your sleeves. But absolutely, one can get where they want to be with that attitude and commitment.
You know, Karim, I mentioned to you that one of your employees or associates, as you would call him, Donald McGregor, came and spoke to a class of mine recently. He's a young guy, and he's got a lot of experience and a very, very intelligent young man. Margot is a young woman, a lot of experience. Both of them are not native born here in the United States, as yourself, not necessarily native born. You know, I mentioned to, and everything you've said sort of comes down to there's no shortcutting the School of Hard Knocks, which basically means suck it up, work hard, be willing to learn, be a sponge, don't be afraid, assume the responsibility. And, you know, it seems that a lot of our students, you know, they are, as I mentioned, either first or second generation immigrants. They have that fire in their belly, they have that work ethic. And I think that's a real asset that we hope to be able to capitalize on and give them a set of fundamental skills that prepares them well. But I want to encourage other young people, foreign born or not foreign born, go back to your roots, go back to hard work. It really does pay off. And I would even venture to say it leads to happiness, because if you work hard and you accomplish something, you end up being a happier person than if you don't go through any kinds of struggles. There's no victory. There's no sense of victory there. So I don't know if there's any last comments or something we haven't talked about that you'd want to add. Please take this opportunity to do that.
Yeah, no, and I think when you touched on Donald and Margot, it's a perfect example for the young students who are listening to this, is that, like in the case of Donald, 12 years ago, who's, you know, 24-year-old analyst, joined us, really rolled up his sleeves, worked very hard nights, long days, and then when he jumped in to help me with the Costa Rica acquisition, towards the end, he came to me with a business plan, and he said, look, I know I'm only 29, but I know you're going to want to bring a chief operating officer with experience to run Peninsula Papagayo, but here's a business plan and I really think I can do it. Can you give me a chance? And I laughed because I've never believed age to be a barrier, because I took my first company public at age 29. So I laughed and I said, you've got it. And he has absolutely, as you know, killed it, in the last 7 years. So absolutely, these opportunities are very, very open for people that really want to get it done and roll up their sleeves, which is exactly what he and now Margot are doing for Gencom.
Well, that's fantastic. You've got a good eye for talent, Karim. Again, so Karim, thank you very much for taking the time to do this. I think anyone who listens to this, if they listen carefully, they're going to get a lot of pearls of wisdom out of it. And I appreciate you taking the time to do so.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.